Well, joining me now is Dr. Sheila Nazarian, an Iranian-American plastic surgeon who fled Iran as a child. Doctor, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Look, it's been another massive weekend. Of course, peace talks have broken down between the US and Iran. This ceasefire is hanging by a thread. And now with the announcement that there's about to be a blockade in the Strait, I just want to show you a bit of audio. Donald Trump has spoken about it. This is what he said.
Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Will not have. There is no way.
What's your response to this and what you're seeing unfold?
I think, Danica, everything is super predictable, and half of it is a sham show for the rest of the world. But this was exactly where Donald Trump wanted to be and where I expected him to be at this point in time. You know, he sent J.D. Vance to Pakistan, of all places, another Islamist country that's been terrorizing India for decades, and, discussing and negotiating in good faith with a terrorist regime. You know, he sent J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance has, rumors going around that he was against this war. And so if he sends J.D. Vance, it's going to look like, oh, he put in his best effort to, do a deal. When obviously we've seen for the last 47 years, there is no deal to be made with this lying, monstrous, horrific regime. Donald Trump, he knows what he's dealing with, but he had to show the world that he gave it a good try at diplomacy. But ultimately, Danica, we have to take the Strait away from, the Iranian regime. This is their sole point of leverage. They can, bring the global economy to its knees. And we can't have this, these crazies in charge of the global economy and global oil transport. So we all knew we had to take over the Strait. We can't leave that there. But Trump had to go through the motions to show the rest of the world that he tried to negotiate.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And, Donald Trump knows the art of the deal. It's been fascinating to see this play out. We had the Truth Social posts where he said he's going to wipe out an entire civilization. Obviously, he wasn't, but, people were losing their minds over that. And the way it has developed, I totally agree with you. He's going through the motions right now.
And Danica, you have to also understand they've been chanting death to America, death to Israel for close to 50 years, and no one freaks out about that. So the moment Trump speaks their language, they lose their minds and they're like, oh, we're better than that. But I want to warn the Western world, including, your country, my country, we can't fight people who aren't, we can't say, oh, we're better than that. That puts us at a disadvantage. So many people, I don't know, in your country, my country, they're so afraid of being called Islamophobic. Mm-hmm. It's like fighting with your hand tied behind your back. You think the people in Iran, this regime cares if you call them names? They don't care at all, and it gives them an upper hand on us. And we have to take away these, we're better than them. And no, we're not. We're gonna get in the street. We're gonna take our gloves off, take our earrings off, and we're going to fight them like they fight us with a razor in our mouth. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And this is a thing, because it's almost like you can't have these conversations without people saying, no, well, you can't have it because it's Islamophobic. No, it's not. We are talking about a murderous dictatorship that has fired on its own civilians, killing 40,000 people. It is not Islamophobic to have a proper discussion about this. So I think you're absolutely spot on. And the other thing is that the Democrats, the left, they too are losing their minds in this war, painting Donald Trump as the enemy, not the actual regime. And I saw this on social media today. You've got hate being spewed across America. This was filmed at Swarthmore College. People are actually chanting for the deaths of Americans. Have a look at this.
Take another soldier out! Take another soldier out! Iran, you make us proud! Iran, you make us proud! Take another soldier out!
You and your family fled this murderous regime for a better life in the US, and these people are actually calling for the deaths of US forces. What's your message to them?
Anika, the kafia is the modern day KKK hood. Okay, so these college kids or, on college campuses, they chanted in support of Hamas. They chanted, in support of these Islamist regime because they just hate Jews and Israel so much that they're willing to side with people who kill gays. They would rather have their child be a murderer than be gay. There's no women's rights. A woman is not worth as much as a man. They're actively participating in owning slaves. The place in Gaza where Black people live is actually called Slave, if you translate it. So that, for 2 years, they've been chanting and they were brainwashed in support of these Islamists. Now, who was supporting Hamas? Who was financially backing the terrorists in Gaza? It was Iran. It was the IRGC. So if now they come out in support of the people of Iran and they chant in opposition of the IRGC, it means that everything that they were chanting for the last 2 years was wrong, and they were on the wrong side because the IRGC equals Hamas. They were using Iranian missiles to lob into Israel. And so it's basically, if they're on the side of Hamas, they must be on the side of the IRGC, because if the IRGC goes, Hamas goes, Hezbollah goes, the Houthis go, and everything they've been chanting for the last 2 years was wrong. So they've seen women get killed. They've seen women be kicked to the floor, kicked in the head for showing a strand of hair. The women get raped before they're killed, Danica, because in this Islamist mind warp, if a woman dies a virgin, she goes to heaven. So to prevent her from going to heaven when they're killing her, they gang rape her first. So these are the people they're aligning themselves with, and this is the level of Jew hatred and Israel hatred that has been indoctrinating them on our college campuses for decades. I went to Columbia University, and I've been telling them for 20 years they have a problem. You have a Jew hate problem. No, we don't. Look at what we're doing here. No, you have a problem. And now it's out in the open for the entire world to see.
Yeah, it's such a shame as well that it's come to this point, but that now, nothing's been done about it. This is the thing. I don't think any government, any administration has ever taken this sort of threat seriously, but now suddenly it's as you said, come to the forefront, and it's frightening. It's frightening when there are people who walk among us that actually hate us, hate your country, hate the West in general, and are so open about it as to chant it at these universities. I think it is actually really, really quite frightening. Doctor, I was watching an interview that you did recently, and you said that you took Islam classes while studying to understand why your family fled Iran under gunfire after the Islamic Revolution. What were the key takeaways from what you learnt?
Thank you for bringing that up. The key takeaways are that I know what it says in the Quran. I know what it says to do to Jews and to Christians and to infidels. The Quran starts off okay, but it ends pretty violently. And in the Quran, what comes later in the Quran is more important than what comes earlier in the Quran. And it says to, kill the Jews. It says to charge taxes on people who are not, following Islam. It says some pretty horrific things. And so, no one can come to me and tell me it's the religion of peace. Now, there are moderate Muslims who have been very quiet. If people were killing, people in the streets, innocent protesters, women, if they were blowing themselves up, screaming Allahu Akbar in Judaism's name, I would be the first one to be like, not in my name. That's not my religion. But for some reason, the moderate Muslims have been awfully quiet for a very long time. We're starting to see a few, come out and say, no, Islam needs to go through an evolution, and we need to take politics out of Islam, and, pray 5 times a day, be a good person, fine. But that would require them, Danica, to deny certain parts of the Quran. And I've had this conversation with very, religious and observant Muslims who say, yes, you're right. We need to sort of have a discussion about those areas and figure out how we can get around them. So if someone is a devout, Muslim and follows everything it says in the Quran, they are going to be violent. They are going to want a worldwide caliphate. They are going to want to kill people who are not, halal, or going to clubs, or listening to music, or dancing out in public. Like, that's what it says in the Quran and in the Hadiths. So it was very eye-opening for me to take these classes, and actually a Persian Muslim woman taught most of the classes to me, and I remember her very well. And there was a part where it said, kill the Jew, like take a knife to his neck. And I said, it was very toned down in the translation. And I said, is that really what it says? And she's like, well, so it's like, if we really want to have an honest conversation about Islam, I'm a doctor. If we want to make a proper diagnosis in order to be able to treat the problem, we have to be able to have an open discussion and diagnose it properly and then move on from there. You can't treat a disease that you cannot diagnose properly. So again, coming back to the whole thing you were saying about Islamophobia, we can't shut people up. Islamophobia is like cutting the vocal cords of anybody who wants to ask a question. Okay, or have a discussion. We can't keep calling people names. We have to sit down, and not me. I mean, Muslims have to sit down and have a conversation and walk through and say, when people think of Islam, what do you want them to think about? Do we want them to think about violence and people blowing themselves up and intifada and jihad and martyrdom and a death cult? Or are we going to go through an evolution like Christianity did? Christianity went through the Crusades, and they ended up on the other side, and look at what a beautiful religion it is now. So it's almost like that Islam needs to go through that process and come out in a manner that is compatible with the rest of the world.
Absolutely. And I think as well it's incumbent on Muslim leaders too to stand up and to talk about this. I mean, here in Australia a couple of months ago we had the Bondi terror attack, the largest terror attack on home soil, and it is incumbent on leaders to call out radical Islam. Now, I will say, the majority of Muslims do live peacefully, say, for instance, here in Australia, and a majority would not interpret the Quran or the Hadiths in a violent way. But to your point, the conversation must be had, and especially where we are right now in a Western democracy, in Western liberal democracies, where there are a lot of concerns. Iran is reportedly speeding up executions now of anti-regime protesters, of course, who took to the streets in January. 40,000 innocent civilians were killed then, and we've just seen many more in the past month alone. There were public executions. Without the death of the regime, how much change will there be or can be, do you think?
The regime has to go. The people in Iran, Danica, are not afraid of these targeted bombing attacks. They're afraid that the bombs are going to stop and that they're going to be left with the same Islamist monsters in power, because it's almost going to be worse. They're paranoid. They're going to have egg on their face, and they're going to want to take it out on the people. So like you just said, during the ceasefire, Iranian leadership came out and said, we have to do more executions. They were doing about 1 or 2 every single day of these young, beautiful people. And now, the people in Iran are terrified that it's going to get worse.
Yeah, it is scary. It is really scary, as you said, until the regime goes. Now, before we let you go, the Trump administration has revoked green cards for 3 more Iranian immigrants with ties to the regime. You'll recall it comes a week after relatives of slain Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani were arrested. This is Saeed Aissa Hashemi, Mariam Tamasebi and their son were taken into custody by ICE agents at the weekend. Hashemi is the son of Masume Ebtekar, also known as Screaming Mary, a spokeswoman for Islamist militants during the 1979 US Embassy hostage crisis in Tehran. Here was the Secretary of State Marco Rubio on that.
Well, he's an expert in genocide. They're experts in that because, they sponsor terrorism all over the world. And they've killed thousands and thousands of people. Look at the Middle East. Look at the Middle East, guys. Every problem in the Middle East tracks back to Iran. Hezbollah, Iran. Shia militias that are destroying and threatening Iraq, Iran. Hamas, Iran. The Houthis, Iran. Assad when he was in Syria, Iran. Everywhere you turn, they're behind all of it. They are a destabilizing, dangerous, evil force that had to be dealt with. They have to be weakened.
How good is it to see the administration taking a hardline stance on anyone linked to the regime?
It is the best. Everything they're doing is the best. Everything they're doing is common sense and should have been done by a previous administration, but no one had the moral character or the fortitude to take action like this current administration. We love President Trump. We love Marco Rubio. Just the moral clarity makes me wake up every morning and thank God that we don't have Kamala Harris and Bunch in power. So yeah, no, it's incredibly refreshing and gives me a lot of hope to see that these leaders know exactly what they're dealing with and that they have the strength to go ahead and deal with it once and for all.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Courage and praise to the Trump administration for doing this. Dr. Sheila Nazarian, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your insights. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.